Well, howdy folks, thanks for joining the Eagle's Nest. It is finally here, the start of a new 22 long rifle series. And the stars of the show are going to be the Bergara B14Rs. Now we have 3 rifles in a factory configuration in which we're going to showcase its performance downrange, seeing how well it performs as well as the reliability in its factory configuration. And later on in the series, I'm going to work my magic to see if I can rebarrel these things to 1, get a better balance of the rifle, and 2, increase the accuracy. So folks that follow my channel and say 22 long rifle is really not my niche, I think you guys will still like this series. So stick around because the Bergara B14Rs are a very affordable platform to get into for NRL 22. So the Bergara B14R is considered by many to be an awesome training platform for learning the fundamentals of long-range precision. It is also one of the top choices for getting into NRL 22 as well as PRS 22. Now the benefit to this action is that it is a Remington 700 clone, so both the scope bases as well as the triggers are all interchangeable. It also being a Remington 700 footprint, it opens up the door to a plethora of chassis and stock choices. So the ammo that we're going to shoot today is Elite 10X. We're going to try this out on all 3 of the actions, as well as the Elite Bullseye, SK Standard Plus. We also have CCI Standard Velocity and Federal Auto Match. So let's start off with the carbon fiber barrel. Let's get this thing zeroed out and see how well this thing does. These B14Rs use full-size AICS pattern mags. Now there are no feed ramps to this mag, but it does have a high feed angle. With these actions being a true control round feed, there's 2 extractor claws which aid in extraction and a hard stop which allows you to control its ejection on a spent case. Now I did some slow-mo video on how these things actually feed up into the actual bolt face, and it's a very unique and very ingenious design by Bergara. Utilizing the spring pressure, once the cartridge gets past the actual lips of the actual magazine, it pops up into place and gets into the actual chamber. It has no problems feeding the Elite EPS style bullets. Because of this, I think this thing's an awesome, reliable platform. Taking a closer look in the Bergara B14R's bolt head design, you'll see 2 extraction claws of the same profile. They are tapered, which allows you to single feed an actual cartridge, or in case you have a malfunction, you could at least attempt to extract it. Now, one side is actually less spring pressure than the other. This being a right hand eject, the left side will be a less spring pressure. This allows the actual control round ejection to do its job. If we compare this to a Voodoo V22 bolt face, you'll see that the V22 only has 1 extractor claw, and the other side is pretty much just a tensioner. Now, it is still tapered to allow you to single feed a cartridge into the chamber or try to attempt to clear a malfunction. However, the downside to this, and this has been my experience, is that it's very weak and unreliable extraction, specifically when you're trying to shoot Elite 10X. And the reason why is because it has just 1 extractor claw. Here's a straight-on shot on the V22, and you'll see that the actual extractor claw is probably only grabbing about 5% of the case rim, which doesn't equate to a lot of real estate. Comparing this to the Bergara B14, at least there's 2 extractor claws, which give it more reliable extraction, and in my opinion, a better platform. To make this comparison fair, we're going to take a look at a Rim-X bolt head next. Now the Rim-X itself is also a control round feed and control round ejection. However, there is no taper to it, and there's no ability to single feed a cartridge. However, the actual ejector and extraction itself covers about 60% of the case rim, which aids in reliability. The obvious downside to this is basically if you just don't put your purse down and you run the bolt super slow, you can induce a malfunction by having a cartridge jump in front of the bolt face of a Rim-X, and then eventually you're going to push that cartridge flush into the breech face, and if you try to close the bolt down, you could actually crack and cause chipping in the actual extractor. So starting my initial accuracy testing, I got the actual carbon fiber barrel tested first. I got the thing bore-sighted using SK Standard Plus, and I pretty much shot what you see in front of you. Now, obviously you see SK, you see Elite, you see Federal Auto Match and CCI. Now, above the target, there was another target I had for using it for seasoning the barrel. So I did 10 seasoning shots before switching into a different type of ammo, obviously because the wax composition of the actual cartridge can be different and could cause accuracy issues. So to be fair, there's 10 seasoning shots before each one of these groups. So 2 of the 3 rifles had 0 malfunctions running through a complete 150 rounds, except for this one, the XRS chassis. I'll go over in a little bit exactly why, but here's what happened.
You just got jammed.
After testing all the ammo on all three rifles downrange, I pretty much summarized that SK Standard Plus performed the best out of all three rifles and went ahead and pushed back at 100 yards. Starting off with a carbon fiber barrel, here's some of the shots that you see at 100 yards in real time. Okay folks, instead of boring you guys with a bunch of video of me shooting down range, here are the results of the 50-yard shots. Starting off with the older style Bergara, what I ended up doing is just measuring from inside hole diameter to the furthest hole diameter on each one of these groups using a Mitutoyo gauge here. A little old school. Other than that, starting off with the older Bergara using SK Standard Plus, produced a 0.8-inch group. Went ahead and shot it again and had a little bit of horizontal stream, still a 0.812-inch group. Switched over to Elite 10X. Now, like I said before, I switched over ammunition. I did shoot 10 fouling shots on a target above it before shooting for a group. That way I could season the bore and all that. The Elite 10X performed all right. I had pretty much 4 stacking here and then 1 outlier that was right there, producing a 0.774-inch group. Surprisingly, the CCI standard velocity held 3 shots in a row right in here. I was like, oh man, don't mess it up. And obviously, either I did or just the ammunition just wasn't performing, hence it being cheap, 0.872-inch group. Federal Auto Match, this was a surprising result to me. Now, I've had actually really good luck with Federal Auto Match with a lot of my Rim-X builds, but Federal Auto Match, 0.471. So that is the older Bergara B14 at 50 yards. Moving down to the carbon fiber version, starting off with SK Standard Plus, 0.912-inch group. Had 1 outlier here. If it wasn't for this, this would have been like a 0.4 something. Shot it again, SK Standard Plus, 0.782-inch. Switched over to Elite 10X with 10 fouling shots prior to shooting this group. Had a very nice 4 shot stacking right here, then obviously had 1 outlier. If it wasn't for this, that would be a 0.38. With that included, that is a 0.729-inch. Now, these were the sighters. I'm not going to include this. This is basically me bore sighting the rifle before shooting all the groups. I put Elite Bullseye, but it's actually SK Standard Plus. So we'll disregard that. But I did shoot Elite Bullseye out of that rifle, and it produced a 0.82-inch group. After that, we went to Federal Auto Match. Again, surprising results. 0.697-inch group. Shot it again and got a 0.806. CCI standard velocity 0.754. So that was a carbon fiber barrel 50 yards. Now the new production Bergara, this is what I purchased recently. This one seemed to perform the best overall at 50 yards, starting off with SK Standard Plus 457-inch, and there was nice 3 shots right here and 2 outliers. Shot another group of 5 with SK Standard, 0.683-inch. Elite 10X, 10 foulers, then shot for group, 0.947-inch. Elite 10X again, this one came together, 0.542-inch. Elite Bullseye, the worst group of the day, 1 inch and 36 thousandths. So, yeah, that's not good at all. Federal Auto Match, if it wasn't for this shot, that would be like the tightest group of the day, being a 0.32. But with that group included, or with that shot included, is a 0.83-inch group. CCI standard velocity is the tightest group of the day, surprisingly, a 0.406 at 50 yards. So that is the new production Bergara. Now, shooting for groups at 50 yards doesn't really mean much. If you need to be competitive for NRL 22, you have to see what you could do at 100 yards. So what was basically shown to me heading over to Rick's and Ray's house over there in North Carolina, basically to be competitive at NRL 22, your rifle should hold a 1-inch pasty at 100 yards. Now, I had pretty ideal conditions at the range today, roughly 1 or 2 mile-per-hour winds, so I'm not going to take into account the weather conditions or the wind playing a factor here. However, let's go over the groups at 100 yards. I use SK Standard Plus for all 3 rifles. It seemed like SK Standard Plus seemed to perform very well. Basing off of that, these are the groups that I got. The new production rifle shot a 1-inch 285 thousandths. If it wasn't for this shot, I felt like I did drop this a little bit on the rear bag here. It actually produced sub 1 inch, so right at 0.999. The older Bergara didn't do so well with SK Standard Plus, producing a 2-inch 157 thousandths group. The carbon fiber was stacking. I mean, these are all 10-shot groups, by the way. Carbon fiber was stacking 5 here, had a couple or 3 outliers up here, but seeing this, I could definitely tell that carbon fiber just wants to shoot a 1-inch 212 thousandths group. So that's 100 yards. If I was to take basically choose a rifle for competition, it would either be the carbon fiber or even the new production rifle. Both of these rifles seem to perform pretty well out of the box, so I'm pretty happy with the results. Well folks, let me give you guys a skinny on trying to get a 22 long rifle to shoot accurate. I see a lot of channels out there that have all of these high-end rifles, and they go out there, shoot, and they're barely holding a group, getting all frustrated and blaming either their technique or their ammo or the rifle. So if anything you could take away from all of these videos, here is basically what I found. Having produced over 260 rifles last year alone, each one of those rifles I've had to test downrange, and not one of them has left my shop until they were shooting a .3 or better. I've also rebarreled 18 Voodoos as the beginning of this year. So what have I seen for accuracy? Here it is. To get an accurate 22 long rifle, specifically built for precision or NRL 22, it is literally 80% the ammunition and 20% the rifle. So even though these things are production rifles, you have to lot test for these rifles. Just because you bought Center X or just because you bought Elite 10X and you have a pretty good rifle or a high-end rifle like a Voodoo or something, you cannot expect that thing to shoot. There's a reason why manufacturers like Lapua or Ely vary the velocities. They actually vary the primer composition as well as the powder charge on each one of their lots. That way you could actually lot test and fine-tune that ammunition to the rifle. Now, as you all know, I mean, unless you get crazy with the 22 long rifle, you can't reload for it. So you are stuck trying to find the ammunition that shoots. So if you're buying a rifle like this, like a Bergara B14, or have a Voodoo or have a Rim-X, and you're trying to chase accuracy, you get those accurate 50-yard shots, the .1s everybody's chasing. There's no magical number and twist rate. I have seen the 1 in 12s that perform the worst. The 1 in 14s seem to perform just as well as the 1 in 16s. And honestly, the 1 in 16s are just a hammer. I mean, that's just the reason why folks that are competing NRL 22, the top 5 in the nation, are shooting 20, 24-inch barrels or 20-inch barrels and a 1 in 16 twist Krieger. So the benefit of rebarreling a rifle such as this with like a Krieger barrel blank is that you get a more consistent bore. There's less, it's less picky on the ammunition from what I've seen. However, you still have to lot hunt, because just like any barrel alone, there's obviously inconsistencies or just basically just differences on how the barrel performs. Even with the 50-yard groups, you can easily tell one of these rifles outperforms all others, and there's still an accuracy difference on all 3 rifles, even though all 3 of these rifles are production made 18-inch barrels from Bergara. So like a tuning fork, that's basically what you're doing. You're trying to find that node, which is the harmonic resonance on the tip of the muzzle, and the only way to do that is lot testing. So if you're chasing accuracy, you do have to lot test for the rifle that you have. Alright folks, to give you my overall impression of the Bergara B14, it is absolutely an awesome option to buy to get into NRL 22. Now, you could buy just the barreled actions for around $670 to just under $700 and drop it into a chassis. Now, from my experience today and shooting these Bergara B14s, I've had malfunctions only on the XRS chassis as far as feeding. What ended up happening is that the magazine itself had quite a bit of slop going up into the actual chassis itself, not seating the actual magazine up into the action, causing the bullets to nosedive into the breech face of the barrel. I've seen this quite often with the Voodoos, and that seems to be the caveat with basically these AICS pattern mags not having an adjustable mag catch. Alright, so the rifle's pointed in a safe direction, and I have basically 10 rounds loaded up in the mag. I'm going to basically try to simulate the issues I have with this chassis. So basically what was happening is that when you seat the mag into this chassis does not have an adjustable mag catch, and there's some slop in the actual, you can see there on the bullet, there's some slop on the magazine itself, causing this thing to basically nosedive and hit the bullet into the back of the breech face of the barrel. So what ends up happening is, if you have it seated all the way up, you'll see it chamber fine. If you have this thing kind of cattywampus, or for instance you're on a barricade and you put some pressure on the mag, it may, if I can get it to do it, it may cause a jam. That one fed a little bit hard. That's it's working. Let me see if I can induce a problem here. There we go. So right there, there's a complete lockup. You guys can see that. Get this thing to focus. Right in the chamber there, you can see where that bullet just ran right into the back of the actual barrel. So I am unable to basically get this thing to feed into the barrel, even manipulating the bolt a little bit. It just is a solid lockup. Now if you're at a stage where time is like 30 seconds or so, that'll force you to drop the mag, clear the malfunction, put the mag back up, and basically feed the next round. Another option you could do is actually put felt on the side of these AICS pattern mags, just to tighten up the slop and play of the actual AICS pattern mag in the chassis itself, so that way you don't get all of this slop. Now this is a no-no, and this is not what you want to see to have reliable feeding. Now as far as the HNT 26 chassis, I did not have one issue at all, even with Elite 10X. So what's funny about all this is that these Bergara B14 actions are $700. Yes, you do have to buy a scope base, and you may want to upgrade the trigger. However, it is still half the cost of a Voodoo. So is it as smooth as a Voodoo? Definitely not. In my previous video I did, I'll link in the top right, I did do some mods to slick up the action. And it is definitely not a Voodoo, it is not a REMX. However, this right here is not bad at all. I mean, you can manipulate this action pretty well, in my opinion. And on this chassis itself, this HNT 26 chassis, the magazines that I have, the factory mags, fit nice and snug, and there's barely any movement. In fact, let me see if I get one of these live rounds, give you guys good representation here. See, very snug. There's no movement up and down. That is a solid lockup. There is side to side play, but very, very minimal compared to the other chassis, and it will literally feed Elite 10X and pretty much all the EPS bullets without an issue. I've shot about 200 rounds off camera with Elite 10X and had zero malfunctions with both the HNT 26 chassis as well as the MPA BA comp chassis, or BA hybrid. So that is my conclusion so far with the Bergara B14s. Definitely, it seems like a very awesome platform to get into. Fairly cheap. The magazines are not super pricey. The actions themselves, the barrel actions from what I see, tend to be a little bit more common, available as of right now. And on the next video, we are going to take apart these barrels, see exactly what kind of headspace measurements we have, the kind of differences we have between the barrels, the jam point, and all of that, just like I did on the Voodoo series. So you guys stay tuned and stick around. I appreciate you guys watching. We're going to make this thing a better shooter. Stay tuned.